PR Connections Radio presents
Welcome to Sports Angle on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Rakelli, and this is going to be a fantastic edition of the Sports Angle on PRConnectionsRadio.com. And the MLB trade deadline 2023, man, it's going to be an exciting time to be a baseball fan, as there's going to be plenty of moves and everything that is going on in the world of baseball. It is going to be exciting, folks. It is going to be really exciting to watch, and we're going to be talking about it and breaking it down as we do our MLB trade deadline preview show here on the Sports Angle on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. So, as we are going to be discussing everything that's going on here when it comes to the MLB trade deadline, I will say for everyone watching around the world, this is going to be an amazing show, and it's going to be incredible, and honestly, it's going to be a fantastic show. So, we're going to be breaking this down by West, Central, and East. So, we will start with the West, then we will get to Central, then we're going to get to the East. Now, I will say that when it comes to the MLB trade deadline, there's going to be a lot of teams that we're going to be talking about. But the first team that we are going to mention is the Arizona Diamondbacks. We're going to start out with the NL West, and we are going to go to Arizona. Look, they had a fantastic start to the year. They had an amazing first 2 months, but unfortunately, their last 2 months has had a bit of a skid in Arizona. They have had a bit of a slide in the National League West, as we are talking about it right here, right now on Sports Angle on PRConnectionsRadio.com, voice of new media. I mean, the Arizona Diamondbacks, this was a team that was in firm control of the NL West, and now they have slid, and they are no longer even in the division lead. Now they are 4 games back from LA. They are half a game out in the wild card. Not many things are going right in Arizona, and a lot of that has to do with their bullpen. Their starting pitching has done pretty well when they are not injured. Merle Kelly, Zach Gallen, they have done really well for Arizona, but the bullpen has been lacking. On offense, maybe you could go out and get a third baseman. You maybe go out and get an extra outfielder, but for the most part, the Arizona Diamondbacks desperately need to get a relief pitcher. And I say the Arizona Diamondbacks, they call their NL West counterpart. They go and get Josh Hader, one of the best closers in the game, and he will help them most definitely get into a playoff spot out there in Arizona. I mean, I have a lot of respect for what Josh Hader has done in his career. Regardless of what he did in Milwaukee, what he's doing in San Diego, he has been one of, if not the best closer in baseball. And it has been fantastic to see what he is doing when it comes to the San Diego Padres. Now, I will mention when it comes to Josh Hader, yes, he has had a bit of a slide since going to San Diego. He has not been the same dominant closer he was when he was in Milwaukee, but he is still effective. He is still one of the best closers in baseball today. And for a team that is lacking bullpen help, for someone who is lacking a lack of bullpen arms in their bullpen, the Arizona Diamondbacks, they need a Josh Hader. So my prediction is the Arizona Diamondbacks, they call up San Diego, and they get Josh Hader from the San Diego Padres to help out their bullpen. So as we are breaking down the West before getting to the Central and then ending it with the East, Arizona Diamondbacks, my prediction is that they get closer Josh Hader from the San Diego Padres. Now, I will obviously be mentioning the teams that are buying, but I also have to mention teams that are selling at the trade deadline, and the Colorado Rockies are most definitely going to be selling at the trade deadline. This is a Colorado Rockies team. You have an all-star catcher in Elias Diaz, CJ Cron at first base, Ryan McMahon at third base. You have Randall Grichuk out there in the outfield. There are some assets that could be sold off in Colorado. And here on the Sports Angle on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media, your host, Ian Rakelli, is predicting that the Colorado Rockies are going to be selling off assets. And I'm going to predict that Elias Diaz and Randall Grichuk are going to be sold at the MLB trade deadline. They are going to be leaving Colorado, and they will be going to some other team in Major League Baseball. So as we are keeping up the theme of the NL West, we are going to go to a team that's already made a few moves, and that is the Los Angeles Dodgers. The LA Dodgers, the powerhouse of the NL West, them going out and getting Lance Lynn, Joe Kelly, and Ahmed Rosario just makes the LA Dodgers a much better team. I mean, this is a Dodgers organization that needed an extra arm in the rotation. They get that with Lance Lynn. They needed some help in the bullpen. They get that with bringing back Joe Kelly. They needed to bring in an extra shortstop. They get that with former Met and former Guardian Ahmed Rosario. And they also brought back former second baseman Kiki Hernandez from the Boston Red Sox. So the Los Angeles Dodgers have done extremely well with this MLB trade deadline. And I have a lot of respect and honestly a lot of praise to the Los Angeles Dodgers. They made some really smart moves in this offseason. Now, I will point out that I believe this is going to be the end of the Dodgers making some moves. I don't have them going out and getting another superstar. I don't see them getting another star. This is going to be a Los Angeles Dodgers team that, unfortunately, they're going to be holding steady. They're not going to be making a lot of moves. I say the Los Angeles Dodgers are done shopping. They've gotten their assets. They've gotten their items. Now they're going to go play postseason ball out there in LA. Now, these two teams in the NL West, they're tricky to talk about, but they seem very necessary. San Diego Padres, this is a team that's at a crossroads right now. It's a San Diego Padres team who on paper looks great. On paper was supposed to be one of the best teams in baseball. They have superstar after superstar after superstar. This is a San Diego Padres team that had so much talent heading into the year, but yet they are struggling to be even at 500 at this point in time. Now, there are people who are analyzing San Diego and believe they're going to be sellers, and that's fine if you do. If you believe San Diego is going to do a fire sell and they're going to tear everything down, that's okay. But the San Diego Padres, I believe, are going to make 2 sells and 1 buy. All right, the San Diego Padres, in my respective opinion, the San Diego Padres, they're going to get rid of someone like a Josh Hader. They're going to sell off some assets, maybe like Blake Snell, for example. But they have a glaring need at catcher. The San Diego Padres have a very bad need at getting a reliable everyday catcher. They do not have one right now. And I say the Chicago Cubs, they have someone that the Padres could go out and get. The San Diego Padres, them getting a guy like Yan Gomes makes a lot of sense for 2 important reasons. Yan Gomes is, one, an established veteran. He has been here for almost a decade. He played in Washington, played in Cleveland, playing for the Cubs now. If you need an established presence in the locker room, Yan Gomes would definitely be that guy. He is someone that could definitely help out San Diego in the short run and in the long run as well. And the second reason is that the Cubs have this young up-and-coming catcher in Miguel Amaya, who is starting to take over more reps and more games lately as the Cubs starting catcher. So, because the Cubs already have a young up-and-coming catcher in Miguel Amaya, they don't really need Yan Gomes at this point. So, do not be surprised if Yan Gomes gets traded from Chicago and goes to a team like the San Diego Padres. So, we mentioned Arizona. I think they're going to get a closer. Josh Hader comes to mind. Colorado is going to be selling off assets. Dodgers have already made some really solid moves with Rosario, Kelly, and Lynn already. And San Diego, I have them making a move for a catcher. But the San Francisco Giants, the Bay Area, they have two glaring needs, and I'm going to kill both of them with one stone right here, right now. The San Francisco Giants are a really good team. They're exceeding expectations. They're doing a lot of things positive and not a lot negative. This is a San Francisco Giants team that's a half a game up in the wild card race. They're contending for a wild card spot, and they're even 4 games back from the LA Dodgers. So it's not even insane to think the Giants could go out and win that division. Now, I will say, and yes, Giants baby. Yeah, Giants are amazing. Now, I will say for the San Francisco Giants, if there is any glaring weakness on San Francisco Giants organization, it is the middle of their rotation. All right, Logan Webb has done well at times. They have some solid guys in their starting rotation, but they don't have somebody in the middle of said rotation. What San Francisco needs is a guy to be at the 3 or 4 spot in that starting rotation. So why not go out and get an all-star like Michael Lorenzen from Detroit? Now, I get it. Michael Lorenzen was only an all-star because he was the best player on Detroit. All right, he had to be there. Detroit had to have an all-star. But regardless of how he became an all-star, at the end of the day, he still is an all-star. He's been pretty solid. He records inning after inning. He is someone who has a low ERA compared to what he is doing in Detroit. And with the Detroit Tigers already selling off assets, it makes plenty of sense that San Francisco Giants pick up the phone, call Detroit, and get a middle-end rotation guy in Michael Lorenzen. And Paul DeJong, not only has there been reports that have come out that the Giants are engaging in conversations to get Paul DeJong, but when it comes to San Francisco, shortstop is actually one of the only positions I can come up with that is actually a problem for San Francisco. They have a solid first baseman. They have up-and-coming parts at second base and in the outfield. Catcher, they're really hoping that Joey Bart and Blake Sabol can eventually become those guys. But at the end of the day, shortstop is a need for the San Francisco Giants. And Paul DeJong, he is on a contract year playing out there in St. Louis. He is an exceptional defensive-minded shortstop, and that is who San Francisco needs. So my prediction out there in San Francisco, if they're going to make a wild card run, they get a guy in the rotation like Michael Lorenzen, and they get a shortstop in Paul DeJong. So that's breaking down the NL West. I will repeat it one more time for everybody watching around the world. Arizona Diamondbacks, they will get closer Josh Hader from the San Diego Padres. Colorado Rockies, they will be selling off assets at the deadline. They are going to be in full sell mode. LA Dodgers, they have already done their shopping for the MLB trade deadline. Lance Lynn, Joe Kelly, and Ahmed Rosario, they're already on the Dodgers. San Diego Padres, they will add a veteran catcher in Yan Gomes from the Chicago Cubs. And San Francisco Giants, they will pick up a starting pitcher in Michael Lorenzen and get a quality shortstop in Paul DeJong. Moving over to the American League West, there is so much to talk about on this side, but let's start out with the Houston Astros, the defending World Series champion Houston Astros. Now, it was already reported that relief pitcher Kendall Graveman, they are already on a move. Kendall Graveman was a Chicago White Sox. He just got dealt to the Houston Astros. That's already a done deal. But the Houston Astros need a starting pitcher. With all the injuries they've had to Urquidy, Garcia, McCullers, Verlander's not there anymore. The Houston Astros desperately need a starting pitcher. Like, if they're going to win a World Series again, Houston needs to bring another arm into that rotation. And I'm going to go back to San Diego here because Blake Snell has been wasted in San Diego. In his 2 seasons playing in San Diego, he has been abysmal. He has been awful. he has been one of the most disappointing pitchers in baseball since coming over to San Diego. I say Houston helps him out. They kind of rejuvenate his career. I say the Houston Astros, they call up San Diego. They give up one or two prospects, and they get Blake Snell from San Diego to come to Houston and be part of the Houston Astros. Now, there are going to be people who are going to like this move. There are people who are not going to like this move. But regardless of the fact, the Houston Astros need a starting pitcher. San Diego, they have too many starting pitchers. And I think they got a little bit of room to get rid of one. So as we are talking about the MLB trade deadline, previewing it here on the Sports Angle on prconnectionsradio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. Lucas Giolito, he has already been dealt from the Chicago White Sox to the Anaheim Angels. In fact, he made his first start for Anaheim in a loss against Detroit earlier today. But the Anaheim Angels are not done making moves. Now, I'm going to clarify this. The Anaheim Angels are not selling Shohei Ohtani. The Anaheim Angels are not going to move Shohei Ohtani. Them getting Lucas Giolito only told me that they are in win now mode. They want to win a championship. They want to win a playoff series while they have Trout and while they have Ohtani. So if you're going to do that, they need an extra guy at third base. Anthony Rendon has been injury prone. He has not lived up to his contract at all. You also have David Fletcher that keeps sending up and down to Salt Lake. Zach Nato, he has done pretty well in his debut, his rookie year, but it's not enough. So I have the Anaheim Angels calling up the Washington Nationals, and I have them taking third baseman Jeimer Candelario, the former Chicago Cub, former Detroit Tiger, now on the Washington Nationals. Now, Candelario has done really well in Washington. In fact, he's been one of the only few bright spots on a underwhelming Washington team. And if you're Anaheim, you really need to capitalize on bringing an extra body into the infield. And getting Candelario to replace Rendon is definitely going to be an important asset for Anaheim. So I say alongside Lucas Giolito, the Anaheim Angels get Jeimer Candelario from the Washington Capitals. I'm referring to the Washington Nationals. The Oakland Athletics, they're going to be very simple. The Oakland Athletics are going to be selling at the trade deadline. Now, Ruiz is currently in AAA Las Vegas, so they're not going to be selling him. But Brent Rooker, Ryan Noda, there's going to be guys like Trevor May. There are assets the Oakland Athletics will be shedding this offseason. And I will say that when it comes to the Oakland Athletics, there is going to be a fire sale in Oakland. I will not be surprised if Fujinami was not the only guy that the Oakland A's sold at the trade deadline. There's going to be a lot more in this situation. Now, the Seattle Mariners are an interesting case. They are in still playoff contention. As a fact, right now, the Seattle Mariners are 2 games over 500. They are 5 games out of the wild card. And the Seattle Mariners, after tasting the playoffs last year, they're going to go all in at the MLB trade deadline. I say the Seattle Mariners, they make 2 impactful moves. They sell off their farm system, go to St. Louis, and get the best third baseman in baseball, and they acquire Nolan Arenado from the St. Louis Cardinals. I mean, it's a Seattle Mariners team that is lacking offense. They do not have many weapons on that team. Getting a guy like Nolan Arenado would definitely help an organization like Seattle. Also, Grichuk out there in Colorado, he would be a solid outfielder they could bring into Seattle. So I say for the Seattle Mariners, they are in buy now mode, and they want to get back to the playoffs like they did last year. So I say Seattle gets Nolan Arenado, and they get Randall Grichuk from the Colorado Rockies. And the last team we're going to talk about on the west side is the Texas Rangers. And the Texas Rangers, their most glaring issue is their bullpen. The starting rotation has been solid. Most of their weapons have been very good this year. But I will say, when it comes to the Texas Rangers, they have been giving up games as of late, and a lot of that has to do with their bullpen. So I say if they pick up the scraps of the AL Central, they call up Kansas City, they get Scott Barlow, and they call up the White Sox, and they get Aaron Bummer from that wrong side of Chicago. Now, I will say with Texas, yes, they've already acquired a Aroldis Chapman, but he is not enough in that bullpen. So for Texas, they fix their glaring need. They double down on the bullpen, and they get two solid arms in Barlow and Bummer. So to recap the AL West here on the Sports Angle on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media, the Anaheim Angels, they already picked up Lucas Giolito. Now they will also go to Washington and pick up Jameer Candelario from Washington. The Houston Astros, the defending champions, have already picked up Kendall Graveman, and I have them predicting that Blake Snell will be dealt from San Diego and will go to Houston and help them during their World Series run once again. The Oakland A's are going to be selling off majority of their assets. John Fisher and Dave Cavall, they're going to be selling off assets once again at the trade deadline in Oakland. The Seattle Mariners, they will go for a home run, and they will go get Nolan Arenado and Randall Grichuk from Colorado. And for the Texas Rangers, they double down on bullpen arms, and they get Barlow and Bummer from Kansas City and Chicago, respectively. So as we are doing our MLB trade deadline preview show here on the Sports Angle on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media, I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. Getting into the AL Central, what a absolute abysmal this is going to be, but we're going to have to talk about it. Chicago White Sox, they are in full sell mode. Giolito's gone. Kelly's gone. Lynn's gone. Graveman's gone. It's a Chicago White Sox team that's selling off majority of their assets. And I don't think they're done. In fact, I have two more moves that the Chicago White Sox are going to make before a trade deadline is up. The Chicago White Sox are doing what they should have done, which is selling off these assets last year. They've just been waiting this year to do it. Cleveland Guardians, they already got Noah Syndergaard from the LA Dodgers in exchange for the Ahmed Rosario trade, but the Cleveland Guardians need an extra bat in the middle of that lineup, and I say Tommy Pham for the New York Mets would be an extra bat they could have in Cleveland. Tommy Pham is not flashy. Tommy Pham is not somebody that's going to impress you or wow you as a baseball fan. But in terms of Tommy Pham, he's respectable. He is someone who can get on base, and Tommy Pham is someone who's good in the locker room. So I say the Cleveland Guardians call up the New York Mets, and they work out a deal to get Tommy Pham. Detroit Tigers, they are in sell mode as well. Not only do I have players like Michael Lorenzen going from Detroit, but I think there's going to be a few starting pitchers as well that are going to no longer be in Detroit after the trade deadline. Kansas City is going to be the same deal, the second worst record in all of baseball. They already traded away Chapman. I think Barlow is going to be gone as well. I mean, the problem with Kansas City is kind of hard to sell off assets that you really don't have to begin with. The Minnesota Twins, the team that's leading this division right now, they're only 4 games over 500. They need bullpen arms. I mean, Minnesota has done really bad at blowing games, especially when it matters the most. So I have the Minnesota Twins calling up the Washington Nationals and getting Kyle Finnegan. And Kyle Finnegan's a solid arm. He would be somebody that could come in late in the game and definitely help Minnesota out when it matters. So Kyle Finnegan goes from Washington, joins the Minnesota Twins, and they add an extra arm to that bullpen. And I will also say when it comes to this division, yes, I have 3 out of the 5 selling off their assets. I have Kansas City, I have Detroit, and I have Chicago all selling off their assets respectively. Cleveland, they will go out and get Tommy Pham. They will go out and get somebody that is going to make them better in terms of the middle of the lineup. And then with Minnesota, they need bullpen arms, so they go out and get Kyle Finnegan. And I know we're going to be talking about the New York Yankees and New York Mets in about 10 or 15 minutes. So that's definitely going to be a lot of fun for everyone watching around the world. About 10 or 15 minutes, we're going to have, we're going to bring on somebody to talk about the Mets and the Yankees. That's going to be a lot of fun. But let's get to the NL Central real quick. Now, the NL Central, this is going to be a hot take, but hear me out of here. The beloved Chicago Cubs, I have them selling at the trade deadline, and let me explain as to why. The Chicago Cubs, Marcus Stroman is a veteran who's an upcoming free agent. Cody Bellinger is an established veteran who's going to be a free agent. Yan Gomes is an established veteran. He'll be a free agent. Kyle Hendricks, the captain of the team, he has been an established veteran. The Chicago Cubs, to put it in a nice little bow, for a player who's an established veteran, I expect them to be dealt. Now, the young players, Miguel Amaya, he's not going to be traded. Nico Horner is not going to get traded. Dansby Swanson, they signed him to a mega deal. He's not going to get traded. Even players like Seiya Suzuki is a young guy who's been there for about 2 years. He's not going to get traded. But the players who are established veterans, who are good locker room presence, they are going to be dealt at the trade deadline for Chicago. And I will not be surprised if Bellinger, if Stroman, and even potentially somebody in that outfield will be dealt come deadline time from the Chicago Cubs. I will not be shocked. I will not be surprised as a Chicago fan if they keep the young guys and they sell the veterans to get prospects and a bunch of players back. The Cincinnati Reds, this is a team that's currently leading their division. I mean, Cincinnati has done a fantastic job this year, but if they've had one weakness, it is their starting rotation. I mean, the starting rotation has had injury after injury. Lodelo, Green. There has been question marks about Ashcroft. Abbott's done pretty well, but there's been flashes there as well. So if you're Cincinnati and you want to win, you need to get yourself another arm in starting rotation. And I say you call up the AL Central, you go down to Detroit, and you get a former World Series champion in Eduardo Rodriguez to be an important part of your starting rotation. Now, Eduardo Rodriguez, he is not going to be a pretty penny that you can just get for nothing. You're going to have to give up some assets in Cincinnati. But with how well their farm system is, with how good their system is, I say Cincinnati goes for it, and they get Eduardo Rodriguez from Detroit. Moving over to the Milwaukee Brewers, the team battling with Cincinnati right now in the division lead. Now, the news already broke that Carlos Santana from Pittsburgh will be going from Pittsburgh to Milwaukee, but they need an outfielder. That offense really needs a shakeup and needs somebody in the outfield to take pressure off of Christian Yelich. So I have Lane Thomas, the ultimate utility guy, coming from Washington. I mean, he's going to be a solid guy who can come in every couple of games and make a noise in Milwaukee. So I say they call up Washington and they get former Cardinal, now National, Lane Thomas out there in Milwaukee. The good old Pittsburgh Pirates, they are going to be selling off assets at the trade deadline. Doesn't matter if it's David Bednar. Doesn't matter if it's Brian Reynolds. It doesn't matter if it is somebody like, for example, they're starting pitching, they're relieving, they're closers. It doesn't matter who it is in Pittsburgh. they're going to be selling off assets out there in Pittsburgh. It's going to be fun and a lot to watch. And for the St. Louis Cardinals, they are going to be selling off assets as well. I mean, it's a St. Louis Cardinals team that really is trying to figure out what their situation is. I mean, they have so many good players on that team. I expect them to all be dealt, or around 80% of them to be dealt by the trade deadline. That does include Paul DeJong. That does include Nolan Arenado. That does include Jordan Montgomery, Jordan Hicks, Jack Flaherty. There is so much talent on St. Louis, and I expect them to be sold and traded and given up by St. Louis at the trade deadline. So to recap the NL Central, we have the St. Louis Cardinals who will be selling off assets. You have the Pittsburgh Pirates who will be selling off assets. You have the Milwaukee Brewers who, despite getting Carlos Santana, they will add an extra outfielder and they will get Lane Thomas. The Cincinnati Reds, they will get Eduardo Rodriguez from Detroit. And the Chicago Cubs are going to make a very tough decision, and they are going to be selling at the trade deadline. The Cubs are going to be selling at the trade deadline. Now, let's get into the NL East. We will do all the teams except for the Mets, because the Mets we're going to talk about a little bit later. I'll be bringing somebody on. He'll be coming down. He'll be trying to talk about the Mets and the Yankees. That's going to be a lot of fun to talk about. But let's talk about the rest of the NL East. The Atlanta Braves have one of the best rosters in the NFL, NHL, NBA, MLB. I mean, this is an Atlanta Braves team that is stacked from ear to ear. But what the Atlanta Braves are trying to do now is trying to build as many arms in that bullpen. And I think getting a speedy, 100-mile-an-hour fastball type of guy is what the Atlanta Braves need. The St. Louis Cardinals, they are in selling mode. They need to get somebody off the books, and Jordan Hicks would be an excellent choice for Atlanta. Jordan Hicks is a guy who will make plays every once in a while. You're only going to have to use him every couple of games. But he would be a solid guy in the bullpen, another arm for Atlanta. So Jordan Hicks going to Atlanta, that will be my prediction there, out there in Atlanta. If you also move over, the Miami Marlins, they made one of the first moves, getting closer David Robertson from the New York Mets. I mean, the Miami Marlins definitely need to fix their bullpen. Dylan Florio, that situation's also out there in Miami. But what they desperately need as well is a shortstop up the middle. I mean, this is a Miami Marlins team that's kind of lacking in that department, and who could definitely benefit from going from Chicago to Miami would be Tim Anderson. Now, it's no secret that Tim Anderson wants to leave the Chicago White Sox. It is no doubt the Chicago White Sox are going to want to deal Tim Anderson this offseason. And I say, why not wait until the offseason? You could do it right now. You could do it at the trade deadline. And I say the Miami Marlins, they call up the phone, they pick up the phone, they call the Chicago White Sox, and they get Tim Anderson to be their shortstop in the last 2 months. I mean, this is going to be a Tim Anderson who is going to play for Miami, is going to help them get a wild card spot out there in the National League. After all, the Miami Marlins have one of the best records in MLB, and they've done pretty well in the situation they have been put in Miami. So I say Tim Anderson, he will go to Miami, and he will be a great addition for them. The other two teams I got to mention, the Philadelphia Phillies, they're going to need some outfielders. I mean, Cody Bellinger and Adam Duvall would be excellent choices for the Philadelphia Phillies. Now, Adam Duvall is kind of a low-risk, high-reward type of guy. He is someone who gets on base. He is someone who has an OPS normally around 700, 800. I mean, Adam Duvall was at one point one of the most underrated players in baseball in between his time in Cincinnati and in Atlanta. So for Adam Duvall, I think he'd be an excellent pickup for Philadelphia. And Cody Bellinger to team up with Kyle Schwarber, Bryce Harper, Nick Castellanos. There's so much talent the Philadelphia Phillies could have. But getting Cody Bellinger, having him be an improvement over Brandon Marsh, I think that would be an excellent move for Philadelphia. And really seems like that's what Philadelphia needs to do, is acquire a Cody Bellinger from the Chicago Cubs and help them get back to the postseason and maybe get a potential wild card situation in Philadelphia. And lastly, the Washington Nationals, they are going to be selling off their assets as well. Lane Thomas, Jameer Candelario, Kyle Finnegan. There are a handful of assets on this team that are going to get dealt by Washington. And I will say that the Washington Nationals, there is a lot to discuss there. Now, I will say that, yes, we are going to be talking about the Mets and the Yankees. I'm going to have a guest come down. He's going to talk about the Mets and the Yankees, but we'll talk about the rest of the AL East until that happens. And the AL East, we have to start out with the Baltimore Orioles. The Baltimore Orioles, they need a starting pitcher. And I say the Chicago Cubs have a starting pitcher the Baltimore Orioles could be getting in mind. Now, as a Chicago Cubs fan, I will say that we want your top prospect. All right, I want Causer. I want maybe Holiday. I say I'm pretty greedy. How about you give us your first overall pick from last year for Marcus Stroman? And if not, give us your top 3 prospect. Give us one of your outfielders out there. That'd be pretty nice too. But I will say from a baseball perspective, it makes a lot of sense for the Baltimore Orioles to go out and get Marcus Stroman. Marcus Stroman would be a rental for Baltimore, but they have the best record in baseball. They have one of the best teams in MLB. Their bullpen has been fantastic, being led by Felix Bautista. Their starting rotation has been solid, but they need an extra arm there. Their starting lineup has been excellent. I say the Baltimore Orioles will go out and call up the Chicago Cubs and get Marcus Stroman from the Chicago Cubs. The Boston Red Sox, they are still in contention. They're still in wild card mode. As a matter of fact, as of this recording, the Boston Red Sox are only less than 5 games back from the wild card. So I say the Boston Red Sox take advantage of it and they try to buy at the trade deadline. And Jordan Montgomery, the former New York Yankee, he got traded to St. Louis in the Harrison Bader deal. He is going to be available thanks to the St. Louis Cardinals tanking and having an absolute blow-up this year. And Jordan Montgomery is a solid arm. He will get you some solid outings out there in Boston. And I think if you're Jordan Montgomery, you can have an excellent third chance going to Boston, playing for their half a year. And I say for the Boston Red Sox, make a very solid move. Go out and get Jordan Montgomery from the St. Louis Cardinals. He would be an excellent guy to have. The next 2 teams, the Tampa Bay Rays, I have them going all in for the first time in forever. And by all in, I have them making very small but important moves in Tampa Bay. Aaron Seville, I think he's been an excellent starting pitcher in Cleveland. He has done incredibly well, especially what Cleveland's had injury-wise. But the Cleveland Guardians, they are going to have to get rid of one of those starting pitchers at the trade deadline. I mean, Shane Bieber, he won't go anywhere. Quantrell, he's not going to really go anywhere. You don't have Clevenger anymore. So Seville, I think he makes a lot of sense for the Tampa Bay Rays to go out and get him. There's also been a Tampa Bay Rays team that Rasmussen's been injured. You have had a situation where starting pitchers have gone down. They've been sent down to the minors. You've had a lot of ups and downs in that starting rotation. So getting Seville would definitely be a really good situation for Tampa Bay. So I think they'll add him, and then they will get an all-star catcher in Elias Diaz from Colorado. I mean, Christian Betancourt has done solid, but he has not been on the same level as of what he's been doing in terms of what Elias Diaz has done in Tampa Bay. So I will say Tampa Bay Rays, they get Aaron Seville and they get Elias Diaz from Colorado. Tampa Bay, they're trying to make a playoff push, get back to the World Series for the first time since 2000. And I will say Tampa Bay should make a lot of good moves. And the Toronto Blue Jays, a team that really is just staying in the fight, trying to get a wild card spot. Their starting rotation has been their biggest weakness this year. The Alek Manoah situation has been abysmal for Toronto. You've also had Kevin Guzman. You've had the unfortunate situation where Chris Bassett hasn't turned out to what he's supposed to be. So for the Toronto Blue Jays, you need an extra arm in the rotation. St. Louis, once again, is going to be selling off assets. So I say you get Jack Flaherty to be a number 3, a number 4 in your starting rotation out there in Toronto. So as we conclude with the AL East, before we talk about those almighty New York Yankees, let's conclude about who's going to be added to these AL East teams. So I have the Baltimore Orioles getting Marcus Stroman from the Chicago Cubs, adding a number 1 arm to that rotation. The Boston Red Sox get a number 2 starting pitcher. They call up St. Louis and get former Yankee Jordan Montgomery. I will say that the Tampa Bay Rays, they go all in this year. They get Seville from Cleveland, and they get Diaz, the all-star catcher from Colorado. And then Toronto, they add a middle end of the rotation, and they get Jack Flaherty from St. Louis. Now, as we are going to talk about the New York Yankees, I'm going to have my guest at this time. This is going to be somebody who is very knowledgeable about the New York Yankees. Someone who definitely knows a lot about the game. And I will say that it's going to be a lot of fun, having him come on the show. Now, I will say for everyone watching around the world, this is the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio. I'm your host, Ian Rakelli, and we are going to pause 30 seconds so we'll be right back. All right, and we are going to be back here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio. I'm your host, Ian Rakelli. We are doing our MLB trade deadline preview. I'm your host, Ian Rakelli, and we have Vegas Mike here on the show. New York Yankees fan, one of the most loyal Yankees fans I have ever met, as we're doing our MLB trade deadline preview. And we're going to be talking about those good old New York Yankees. But first on, Vegas Mike, welcome back to the show. It's been a while since I've had you on. How's it going? How's it going today?
I would like to say that listening to you for the last hour, there is very few people who that in-depth of a knowledge and can talk in that type of detail about all these available players and everything in 1 hour. Now, there's a lot of people who can write about it, but I'd like to compliment you and say, great job for the last hour, Ian. Now, you asked me about the Yankees. I don't even know who the Yankees are. I have no idea who the Yankees are. Are they a hitting team? Do they hit for RBIs? Do they hit for home runs? Do they hit for batting average? Do they have great pitching? Do they have great fielding? They have none of that. I have no idea who the Yankees are. I can look down that roster and tell you they are the no identity Yankees. They're the Zorros of Major League Baseball this year. They have no identity. They're masking it really well. Now, there are a couple of games, Ian, out of the wild card, and I think they're lucky. I think that's just luck because they started off the season so good when they had a little bit of identity. So if we're going to talk about who the Yankees are going to trade for or they're going to trade away, I say they could trade away half the team and nobody would know it. There's a lot of ideas out there who they could get. Do they want to go across? Do they want to go across country and get something else? I don't know. Who do you think, Ian, the Yankees ought to look at with the no? I'm calling them the no identity Yankees.
I mean, I will say when it comes to the no identity Yankees, as you are putting it, I mean, I think the New York Yankees, they are going to do what the Yankees have always done, and that is go for the home run. They don't go for the single. They don't go for the double. They don't go for the triple. This is the New York Yankees we're talking about. They're going to go for that grand slam. They're going to go for the best of the best. And I say the New York Yankees, they will pick up the phone. They will call A.J. Preller and the San Diego Padres, and they will get the best available player in this trade deadline. I'm going to say it right here, right now, that I think the New York Yankees, they will acquire one of the best outfielders in the game. I have your New York Yankees, Vegas Mike, acquiring Juan Soto from the San Diego Padres. I mean, this guy, the way that the energy pops off the bat, I mean, he has been one of the best hitting outfielders in the game, one of the best hitting players, period, in MLB. And when it comes to Juan Soto, the San Diego Padres, that experiment has not ended well. He has not done really well in San Diego. So I say for Juan Soto, it's time for him to get out of San Diego, go to the New York Yankees. And man, can you imagine that outfield with Juan Soto and Aaron freaking Judge coming back from the IR, making his first appearance in a little while. But yeah, Juan Soto, Aaron Judge, going to be part of the New York Yankees. That is my prediction here on the Sports Angle on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. Everyone watching around the world, I want your reaction, what you think will happen with the New York Yankees. But my bold prediction, my bold take is that you guys go for it. You be the Yankees like you always have been, and you go get the best player available, and that's Juan Soto from San Diego. Reason why I believe why Juan Soto is going to be available. Look, San Diego has been a dumpster fire this whole year. Juan Soto, he has been one of the best players in baseball, but he has been very underwhelming since going from Washington to San Diego. I mean, let's face it. Juan Soto was a top 10 player in MLB heading into the year. A lot of people forget that most people have him as a future star in MLB, as a poster child of MLB alongside Fernando Tatis Jr., alongside Xander Bogaerts. I mean, this is a Juan Soto who was helping the Washington Nationals win a World Series when he was only a teenager out there in MLB. So I will say for Juan Soto, he is still an electrifying player. He is one heck of a talent. And if you are the New York Yankees and you want to win like you say that you want to win, I say the New York Yankees, you pick up the phone, Brian Cashman, you call A.J. Preller, and you get this done deal today. And you make sure that the New York Yankees go out and get a Juan Soto. They get someone who can help that offense and bring some more home runs to a hitter-friendly ballpark in Yankee Stadium.
I love that enthusiasm. I love that idea. Now, if you could just call Brian Cashman and tell him that would be great. Maybe we can find his phone number. We can call the New York Yankees and you can leave a message for him that he ought to go out and get Soto, because that would add identity. So it's a great idea. But they still have a hiccup, a big hiccup, a hiccup in a long-term contract called Stanton. That's their problem. That's been their problem for 3 years. He's so erratic. Some days he can be great and some days he can be terrible. And they are going to hiccup and hiccup for the next 3 years. I would love them to go back to the World Series, but they've got that hiccup in Stanton, and I don't know what they're going to do about it, because they better come up with an idea fast, or they're going to be another 5 years in this very volatile, who am I am no identity team, because they also need pitching. They cannot go very far. I don't care if they get into the playoffs with Soto or not. Judge and Soto would be a great outfield. Ian, they need some pitching. To go very far in the playoffs, you need hitting, but to get into serious contention, you need some pitching. And even though they have two fantastic, maybe three good pitchers, they need one more, and they need some relief also. So until they get that, I don't think they're going to go very far, even though I would love them to. And then I would call them the Yankees with an identity, but they've got to figure out what to do with Stanton. Maybe they could just trade Stanton for Soto and give $100 million to San Diego and call it good and get it over with. What do you think of that idea?
Love for that to happen, and I would absolutely love for Giancarlo Stanton to be dealt. I mean, that contract, that $22 million he's going to get from the New York Yankees for the rest of his 30s. But when it comes to Giancarlo Stanton, unfortunately, that 207 batting average is just not going to be good enough for any team to want to go and get him. You essentially would have to give up another asset, including some top prospects, in order to get Giancarlo Stanton off your payroll. I mean, that's just a situation with the Mets right now and the Yankees too, where they have all these contracts, these abysmal contracts, and they just can't get rid of them. So I will say for the Yankees, you definitely need some starting pitching. The problem is we're almost 2 days in, and a lot of starting pitching is already gone. Lucas Giolito, he's in Anaheim now. Lance Lynn, he's in LA now. Kendall Graveman, he is in Houston now. I mean, you're seeing all these starting pitching. You're seeing all these pitchers already off the board. And it's going to be really interesting to see what happens moving forward. But yeah, I think the Yankees might even be a little bit too late in terms of starting pitching, because you're having all these good starting pitchers now already being dealt and already being traded away. So yeah, I would like for the Yankees to get somebody, but unfortunately, I don't think it's going to happen. I don't see it being a reality because unfortunately, when it comes to New York Yankees, I think that they have waited a little bit too late for them to get a good starting pitcher at this trade deadline. Would be nice, though.
I know a great landing place for Stanton. Take $100 million, send it with him, put it in the envelope, send him on an airplane, and send him to Oakland. That's what I would do. Now, I know that team would take Stanton and $100 million. No doubt they would do that. That would help them build that new stadium here in Las Vegas. And then when Stanton gets here, he would be in Las Vegas. He could take that money he could go to the gambling casinos and gamble all night. He would have a great time here. So I think Stanton to Oakland with $100 million is the answer. Now, getting on a more serious note here, Ian, I believe across town, there may still be some pitching for the Yankees to acquire. I still think the Mets are going to do some trading. Cohen cannot be a happy guy. He wants to win. He wins all the time. He made all that money by winning. He doesn't make money by losing. Steve Cohen does not like to lose. So I am suggesting to you that there still may be some starting pitching available right across town for the New York Yankees. What do you think?
I mean, it's a good idea, and I will acknowledge that it is a good idea. But the one problem is I don't think Steve Cohen would be willing to trade a Max Scherzer to the Bronx. I don't think he is willing to trade a Justin Verlander to the Bronx. I mean, to be a Mets fan, first off, majority of Mets fans don't even like the Yankees to begin with. A lot of Yankees fans, they don't like the Mets fans to begin with. There's already that rivalry there. There's that crosstown thing that already exists. But when it comes to Steve Cohen, with the excitement that a lot of Mets fans had when he bought the team, he was cutting checks. He was making sure Verlander got $86 million. They made sure Scherzer was getting over 100. That was what the Mets did. The problem now, besides the fact that the Mets already sold David Robertson and sent him to Miami, Tommy Pham, I have him being dealt the trade deadline. The New York Mets are going to get rid of some players at the trade deadline, but are you willing to give up on two guys that you're paying $86 million for this year? Are you willing to bite the bullet and accept that, hey, I may be overpaid for Max Scherzer. Maybe I overpaid for Justin Verlander. Because if you did, then maybe you're having to accept that you did what the Washington Redskins did during the Dan Snyder era. Oh, I'm going to go out and give all this money to Deion Sanders. I'm going to give all this money to Bruce Smith. I'm going to give all this money to all-pro players that were way past their prime. So I will say to the New York Mets, Steve Cohen, if he does make a deal for them, great. But I think, in my professional opinion, Verlander's going to stay put. Scherzer's going to stay put unless the Mets get such a great deal they cannot pass it up.
And to the Mets. Instead of Oakland, there we go. Maybe Steve Cohen will take him. No, that's being degrading. Steve Cohen's a nice guy. He'll shake your hand. He's a real nice guy, but he wants to win. And he's not winning, and he's know what he's paying, and he will sell. He will sell. I'm convinced he will sell. Now, he may not send him to the Yankees. He may not want to strengthen his crosstown rivals, but I don't see why one of those two people will not go this year. Verlander's what, 41, 40, something like that?
Verlander's in his late 30s.
I thought he was close to 41. Even though he's a good guy, good pitcher, he's dedicated, he's diligent. I really like him. Let's face it, his days as an ongoing starter are done. He could maybe come in as a middle reliever or something if he wants to keep playing. So, and I think Cohen knows that, and I think Verlander knows that. And I think the hitters who are hitting off of him know that too. So his days are done. Scherzer's still okay, I guess. How old is Scherzer?
Scherzer is 38.
So he's maybe got 1 or 2 more years. So why would they not go ahead and say, hey, we're not going to do anything this year. We're 8 games out of the playoffs. We're 8 games out. We're not going to be there. Those guys are of an age, Ian, where they really can sell them, and they really should. And I would suggest to you that Steve Cohen's smart enough to know that, because next year their value goes down even more. Verlander's and Scherzer's values drop in half next year. So they can maybe get some trade capital this year, but they're not going to get it next year. They'll just have to pay him out. I think, isn't Verlander's contract up next year or something too? So they're not going to get anything for him. So maybe they can get some capital this year, but they're not going to get any capital. So why Verlander's not on the trade block, I don't know. And I would think he would be.
As we are actually getting towards the end of the show, it's just going to be an hour show here on Sports Angle on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. I will mention, however, when it comes to the rest of MLB, when it comes to New York Mets, when it comes to New York Yankees, I mean, have you been watching the rest of the AL East right now? The Baltimore Orioles, the best record in MLB. Tampa Bay Rays had one of the best starts in MLB history. Toronto Blue Jays, they have been one of the most electrifying teams in MLB. And then even the rival Boston Red Sox are still 6 games over 500 at this current point.
And they are actually above the Yankees in the playoff run, which is disgusting. But if you're going to pull the plug on the show and make it an hour in, let me say one thing. I applaud the Angels for pulling Ohtani off of the trade block. Now, they got a problem is they're going to pay $140 million to 3 people to try to make the playoffs. But that was the wisest thing they did, was to go out and acquire some players to try to get into the playoffs and give Ohtani a taste of the playoffs, because that's what he wants. He's the professional, consummate, one of the stars of the ages baseball player.
I absolutely agree that when it comes to Shohei Ohtani, I love what the Anaheim Angels have done. I think what the Anaheim Angels have done is pretty smart in terms of building around Shohei Ohtani, because they know that this is potentially the last time that we might see Shohei Ohtani play in Anaheim. And as we're talking about Shohei Ohtani here on Sports Angle on PRConnectionsRadio.com, voice of new media, Vegas Mike, I want you to leave the audience with one important thing, and that is next year, the next offseason, Shohei Ohtani, he'll get about $550, $600 million in this offseason. But I want to know from you, what team do you have Shohei Ohtani going to next year, in your professional opinion?
No. Sorry about that. I couldn't resist. It's going to be a West Coast team. I don't think he's going to go east unless he makes a fortune. Now, he could go to the Yankees. He could go to the Mets. He could go to Atlanta. He could go to Boston. If somebody's willing to give him $600 million, he can end up anywhere. He's the professional baseball player, the consummate baseball player. He's dedicated to baseball. Anybody who gets him is going to have a star on their hands. So Ian, I think right now he could go anywhere. It just depends on where he wants to go and how much money he wants. But he's in his late 20s. I think he's like 29 or something. So he's got 7 to 10 years. So somebody that wants to pay him, he will go there. He wants to stay on the West Coast, I believe. He might go to Texas. He said he would go to Chicago. I think that was just a farce to try to distract everybody. But I honestly believe whoever will pay him is where he'll end up. And that but it would be tough for the Angels to do it and keep their team together, Trout and everybody. So I don't think the Angels will get him unless they're willing to dismantle the team, but then he won't be in the playoffs. He wants to go win a World Series. Who can win a World Series? Who can pay him the money? That's where he's going.
Sports Angle on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I say that Shohei Ohtani, I've been saying this for about a year now, that he will go to the Seattle Mariners. I think the Seattle Mariners will be an excellent thing for Shohei Ohtani. I think he'll be excellent there. And you know what? I think since we have actually gotten over the hour mark, I think it's actually excellent that we can kind of talk about the rest of MLB for a little bit. If you don't mind, we can talk a little bit more.
Well, first, I'd like to challenge your Seattle. He wants to go to a team that's going to win the World Series. Remember that. He wants to go to a team that's going to go far, far in the playoffs. When was the last time Seattle went far in the playoffs, Ian?
Time we made it to ALCS was about 1997, 96.
He wants to be a competitive team. And one player, no matter how good Ohtani is not going to get Seattle there. It's like with LA. With the Angels. Trout's there, but they still had to go out and get a couple people to make the playoffs. Team that can go far in the playoffs. I don't know who that is. He will make that decision. I don't know who's going to build around him. Whoever it is, got to be willing to pay a lot of money. They're going to pay, whoever it is going to pay 2 players on their team at least $100 million and maybe 3 players $150 million. So it's got to be somebody who's willing to pay the money, somebody that can go far in the playoffs. Would I love to be the Yankees? Oh, how I'd love it to be the Yankees. Who wouldn't? Who wouldn't want him? Consummate professional, consummate athlete, consummate star, loves the game, plays it to play the game. He plays the game 24 hours a day. Love the guy, great guy. Wish there was more like him. But yes, he will go not to Seattle. He will go to a team that's going to go far in the playoffs.
Oh, you know what? Let me toss out one more team out there. What about the San Francisco Giants? The San Francisco Giants, they've been a team that's been trying to get Aaron Judge. They tried to get him. They tried to get Carlos Correa. The Giants have been desperately trying to get their own version of a superstar. To put it bluntly, they've been trying to find their next Buster Posey, their next Barry Bonds, their next Willie Mays. The San Francisco Giants are trying so hard to get their next superstar out there in the Bay Area. So what about the San Francisco Giants out there at Oracle Park? I think that would be excellent for Shohei Ohtani.
Francisco is a great idea. Obviously, the Dodgers are going to be there and play. They're going to have to want to put up the money. The Angels are going to try to keep him, but they've got to prove they can go far in the playoffs. In fact, that's why they got those 2 guys the other day, is because they want to prove to Ohtani they're willing to spend the money to go into the playoffs. That was what that was all about. It's not because he wanted to spend the money. It's because he had to prove something to Ohtani to try to re-sign him. Will they go far enough to prove it to him? I don't know. Whoever it's going to be, though, is going to have to show they can go it. I don't think it's going to be the Cubs. The Cubs seem to be getting desperate for some reason. Texas maybe, but Houston also is a candidate. I think he would strongly consider Houston. In fact, I think Houston's a dark horse in this. If they wanted to pay the money, I think they could get him because they proved they can go there. I know there's a great disillusionment with them over a couple years ago when they were caught doing things they shouldn't have been doing, let's say. But I still think Houston would be a candidate. I doubt he'll go into Canada, even though I know you like. I know Toronto's always top of your list. I know that Ian, always picks Toronto someplace, whether it's the NHL or the NBA or MLB. It's because they don't have an NFL team, or he'd pick Toronto.
There's the Buffalo Bills. If you really want to go that route, the Buffalo Bills are the closest fan to Toronto.
I don't think he's going to go to Toronto. I don't think he's going to go to Canada. I don't think he will like Detroit. I don't think he would like Milwaukee. I don't think he would go up there. But I would say him playing further to the south, or maybe in the Big Apple. Maybe in Atlanta, I could see him there. But whoever wants him and can pay for it and can show him that they're going to be contentions, they have a chance. And I think Houston's a dark horse, unfortunately, but they are.
We have to mention the last team when it comes to Shohei Ohtani, a team that really no one is talking about, and a team that really looked like they were interested in even trying to trade for Shohei Ohtani before the Angels doubled down and got Giolito and Lopez. But what about the upstart, the uprise, the Arizona Diamondbacks? How about them? The Arizona Diamondbacks, they have an excellent farm system. They have a team on the rise. Corbin Carroll, Rookie of the Year. I mean, this is a team that definitely has built their roster over the last few years. And with Arizona, they've always been a team that has been good, but they've been waiting for that superstar. Once again, ever since Paul Goldschmidt left the Arizona Diamondbacks, Corbin Carroll looks like he might potentially be that guy, but they haven't had a solidified superstar since Goldie left and went to St. Louis.
It does not get you far in the playoffs. If it happened, Trout would have been there and the Angels would have been there a long time ago. And when they got Ohtani, they would have been there. They have not been there. It takes a very well-rounded team that's willing to spend a lot of money, has a lot of depth, and has pitching. You got to have that pitching. And unfortunately, the Yankees don't show they have it. Unfortunately, the Mets have old pitchers. Houston looks fairly good. I wouldn't like to see him go to Houston, but they're a dark horse, but not Arizona. Arizona is going to be no different than the Angels. The reason the Angels made the move the other day, they wanted to try to prove to him that they can go into the playoffs and move up. Whether that'll prove it to him or not, I don't know. But why would you go to Arizona? To prove that you can be the star there but not go anywhere. The same way with Seattle. It's got to be a team that he will have studied and that his associates will have studied and said, you can go to a World Series. Remember, he wants to go to a World Series. He just does not want to be the star of the team and make $600 million. I would see him saying, I'll take 500, but you get me to a World Series. That's the kind of guy he is.
We're talking about Shohei Ohtani here on Sports Angle on PRConnectionsRadio.com, voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian McKelly. And I will say, as we're here with Vegas Mike, I noticed that you have the standings in front of you right now. You have the MLB standings. You're looking at everything right there. But when it comes to the American League, how bad is the AL Central? Come on now. Like this AL Central, there has been talk and conversation that the American League Central should not have any team at all make the postseason.
I don't know. You really like those White Sox.
I'm going to say this real quick.
Really like those White Sox.
Look. When it comes to the AL Central, I think that if there was a way to get all 5 teams in the AL East, probably MLB would try to do it. But when it comes to realistically, I think with the AL Central, the way they have been performing, Minnesota has been average this year. They have not been great. They haven't been a playoff caliber team. They have been average. So I really have to know when it comes to the AL Central, do you believe in the notion that if the AL Central finishes with a record under 500, should they not be allowed to be in the MLB playoffs? Should the division winner, if they go 81-81, 80-82 for argument's sake, that they should not be in the playoffs, and the team with the next record out in the AL wild card should jump in and be the 7th seed?
Question. I will try to give you a facetious answer. The answer is no, MLB is not going to change it just because the Central's so weak. And let me ask you, what happened to the White Sox? You and one of your other broadcasting friends kind of liked the Chicago White Sox and thought they were going to do great. What happened to them?
Happened was none of their young guys had developed. All their prospects have gone to the majors and have flunked out. Their veteran signings have not panned out. I mean, this is a Chicago White Sox team who their best player this year has been Jake Burger. I mean, I really have to explain how bad that is. Jake Burger is the best player on the White Sox this year. The pitching has regressed. Ken Williams, I will be surprised if him being the president of baseball operations, him with Rick Hahn, I'm surprised Rick Hahn still has a job. But when it comes to Chicago White Sox, they didn't hire the right manager. Pedro is solid, but he is not the right fit for Chicago. So if you're really asking what's wrong with Chicago White Sox, it starts from the top and works its way down to the bottom. But no, Chicago White Sox, this is 100% on them. Yes, I know what broadcasting buddy you're talking about. He predicted that Lucas Giolito would go from Chicago to Anaheim. He did predict that. But when it comes to the MLB trade deadline, I just look at it and go, you know what? This is a situation where the White Sox are going to sell off assets. Pretty much all of the AL Central is going to sell off assets, except for maybe Cleveland, because I think they can win a division. But to conclude, the White Sox are terrible. Kansas City is awful. And then I also have to mention Detroit is stuck in no man's land. So does that answer your question when it comes to that?
The second part of the question is, will MLB change their rules? Well, if they're going to change it, they're going to have to change it for the National League, and they're going to have to change it forever. So will they start saying that the number one team in each division can't get there, even if they're number one? That's a big change. And they're not going to change it just for this year. If they change it, it's going to be permanent. And it's going to be for both leagues. And even if you look into the National League Central, there must be something wrong. Everybody must want to play on the East Coast, West Coast, or South Coast now. Nobody wants to play in the Midwest. Even in there, you look at Milwaukee. I know you kind of like Milwaukee. But even Milwaukee, look at the Cubs. They've deteriorated. Look at the Cardinals and their struggles this year. Cincinnati is not in the Central, but I mean, they're more towards the East Coast, but even the Central teams in the other league are struggling. So, Ian, I think it's where the players don't want to play as much as anything else.
This question when Ellie De La Cruz was starting to become this really good player for Cincinnati. I asked, when's the last time a Midwest team had a superstar in MLB? Like, when was the last time the Cincinnati Reds had a superstar? Because to me, Joey Votto was a star, but I never considered him a superstar. I mean, was it Ken Griffey Jr.? Was it Barry Larkin? Like, when's the last time we had a superstar be from the Midwest?
Ago? No. The last time you had a superstar, of course, you had those couple with the Cubs for those couple of years there. But they come and go, but it seems to be like a trend now. You either want to play on the West Coast or the East Coast, or you're down in the Gulf Coast someplace. But it seems like the Central is having problems keeping superstars. And I think it's in the National League too. I don't think it's just in the American League.
I mean, it's a lot of credit there when it comes to that. And I will say when it comes to AL Central, hopefully Minnesota or Cleveland has a record over 500 by the time the season's over. Hopefully that's the reality. Now, the NL Central, you talked about Milwaukee. Yes, I am a big advocate for Milwaukee. They have one of the best starting rotations in baseball. Bullpen is deep. The offense has some question marks. That's why they went and got Carlos Santana at first base to upgrade there. But when it comes to Milwaukee, I'm a huge fan of them. And I do believe that pitching and defense does win championships in baseball. So Milwaukee, I think they're a team that's slept on right now in MLB. Cincinnati is kind of on the opposite end. Pitching has been underwhelming, but the offense has been explosive. De La Cruz has been one of the best stories in baseball. So, I mean, Milwaukee and Cincinnati have done good. Cubs are one game over 500 right now. So for the Chicago Cubs to be 52-51 heading into the trade deadline, I wouldn't be surprised at them being 5 games under 500. They made some noise. And hey, a lot of people are forgetting that for the first time in forever, the St. Louis Cardinals are not going to be in playoff contention, and they're going to have to be sitting on the bench come October.
I think any team that's more than 6 games out of the wild card, I think they're the people who need to go ahead and trade or commit to what they're going to do for the future. That's why the Mets aren't going to make it. That's why they might as well do something with their 2 age pitchers. They really need to do that. And I think these other teams do too. So if you're more than 6 games out, you're not going to be there. You only have August and September to go. So 6 out. Yankees, yes, they have a chance. Boston has a chance. Seattle, as much as I hate to say it, because I love to give you a bad time about it, they have a chance. And Cleveland, maybe. And in the National, you've got maybe Philadelphia that can make it, maybe San Diego. So that's why I would be surprised if San Diego is willing to rape themselves for the Yankees' benefit. But I would say 6 games out, you're done. So you may be the guys willing to trade.
Yeah, and as we are talking about the MLB trade deadline here on the Sports Angle on PR of New Media here on PR Connections Radio, I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. And I will mention that you are talking about teams that are really competitive and everything that's going on there, but I really have to mention when it comes to the World Series. Now, I will keep in mind that Toronto and Milwaukee was my pick. Toronto versus Milwaukee. And I understand that there are people out there who are going to laugh at that. Hey, beginning of the year, your predictions are always going to be wrong at the end of the year. I mean, it doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter how bright you are. You're going to be about 60-40 on your predictions. If you're a genius, maybe 70-30 when it comes to your predictions. But I will say when it comes to Toronto, them being a playoff team at this point, I'm not going to count them out. I understand Tampa Bay is there. Baltimore is there. In the Central, I think Atlanta is pretty much the go-ahead favorite right now to win the World Series coming out of the National League. But Vegas, Mike, what about you? Like, a lot of people are saying that Baltimore versus Atlanta would probably be a great series to watch. You would kind of have, offense versus defense kind of thing. Baltimore with their excellent offense and their youth. Atlanta with their defense and their high explosive bullpens and everything going on. But what about you? Who do you have in the World Series if you had to make your prediction 2 months from now? Who do you have in the World Series in MLB?
Baltimore and Atlanta. MLB is going to barf all over themselves. Their ratings will be Zippo. The MLB is in it all for the ratings, and it's got to be high profile, big city, legends. That's who they want. So do I see Baltimore there? No. Why don't I see them there? Because this is their first year into the spot. They don't have the history there to get them through to that point. Atlanta could be there. It's not Atlanta that the MLB would barf over. It would be more Baltimore being there. So, yes, Atlanta could be there. Obviously, Atlanta and the Dodgers are your 2 top contenders out of the National League. And one of those 2 should be there. I don't think it's Milwaukee. I really don't think it's Milwaukee or Cincinnati. The Dodgers strengthened with those acquisitions. So I think you're looking at the Dodgers, and I think you're looking at Atlanta. Those got to be your 2 top contenders, and their strength is there. In the American League, Tampa Bay seems to be pretty darn strong. And Houston seems to recover, unfortunately, when they need to. So, again, I don't think it's going to be a Baltimore. I don't think it's going to be a team like that. No.
I understand the ratings, everything like that. All right, so if you're going to do ratings, how about for the 5th time in a row, of course, exaggeration, why don't we have Houston versus LA? Once again, we have the Astros, we have the Dodgers, we have 2 high-profile teams in the World Series. How about it? Because it really feels like we have seen that story, that same song and dance over and over and over again. As a matter of fact, I don't know even if you would know this, Vegas Mike, but since 2017, every World Series has featured either the Dodgers or the Astros in it. I don't know if you knew that. I don't know if our audience knew that. But it has been 7 World Series in a row that has either featured the Dodgers or has featured the Astros in it. So you have to go all the way back to 2016 with Chicago and Cleveland to the last time we had a World Series that didn't have an Astro or didn't have a Dodger in it. So for the people who want to say Houston versus LA, that's kind of like the consensus pick. That's the obvious pick if you understand patterns with going on at MLB. But what do you think, Vegas Mike, for 6th year in a row? Are we going to have a Houston or LA team being?
One of the two. I would say one of the two. I don't know which one, but if we're here in Las Vegas, and that's why we're called the Vegas Sports Hub. That's why we're called Vegas Mike. You look at the odds, you look at the probabilities. It would at best be even money for both of those to make it. So I don't think it, but I believe that one of the two could be there if you were to bet money on it and you were trying to pick one and you were actually betting money. It would be one of the two. I don't know which ones. I know that you got to look at Houston. They've only got 51 wins this year, and you look at Tampa Bay and they've got somewhere's up to about 58. But that's in the past. You got to look at what they're going to do going forward. And Houston's going to strengthen a little bit. And Tampa Bay's kind of stood flat. So, and I believe that Tampa Bay has a chance to push through to there. Some people say Texas. I doubt it. Texas hasn't. Texas is like Baltimore. They don't have the flavor in them to get there. So I don't think it'll be them. I don't think it'll be Baltimore or Texas. I wouldn't be betting on that. I wouldn't be betting on Minnesota either. So I think it'll be one of those two will make it. I think the Dodgers or Houston would be a good bet to make it.
And somebody just mentioned in the chat. All right, what would be the worst? All right, hold on. All right, and this is Sports Angle on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Rakelli. We're going to go to Twitter at Sports Angle on PR because somebody did mention on our social media, what would be the worst World Series matchup ratings-wise for MLB? Like, which two teams would be the worst for MLB? And I think, to me, that's a pretty obvious answer, and I'm going to kind of go with mine here. I think the worst possible matchup that you could ever have for MLB would be the Colorado Rockies and the Oakland Athletics. I think that would probably be, in terms of ratings, having Colorado and Oakland face off in the World Series. I don't really know many people who would want to enjoy that. I would say maybe Washington and Kansas City. Maybe that'd be on that same level. What about you, Vegas Mike? Like, what would be two teams that MLB would be like, all right, shut this down, we're not doing it?
In Detroit, they would want to shut that down. That's it. I mean, seriously, we're talking about the middle of the country losing quality players. I think that would be a tough sell. Oakland would be great. If Oakland actually made it to a World Series, can you imagine they would be doing it as the Vegas? Big excitement about that, Ian. You got to figure that. So I think if Oakland made it, it would be so startling and the whole world would watch it. It would be the most startling thing in the world. So the whole world would watch it, even if it was in Oakland, and particularly if it's in Vegas. So I don't think Oakland would be that startling. And I think people would enjoy it. But I think it's those two. I think it's those two or three North Central teams, not because the middle of the country is not good. I love the people there. They're great people. They're hardworking people. They're very good people, but it doesn't seem to generate the enthusiasm because people don't want to fly to Minnesota. People don't want to fly to Detroit. People don't want to fly up to Milwaukee to see these games. They don't draw that excitement. People like to go to the Gulf Coast. People like to go to the West Coast. People like to go to the East Coast. So it's a matter of people's taste. and where they like to be, not a matter of the quality of the areas, because the Midwest people are great people. Just love them. They're wonderful people. They're hard workers. They're smart. They're great people, but they almost don't draw that attention in. So it's not about the people. It's just about the areas, just what it is.
I absolutely agree. And since you mentioned the A's and vice versa, me mentioning the A's, when it comes to the Las Vegas A's, we're kind of going to use this to kind of round out the show. But how exciting is it going to be to have the Las Vegas A's, to have the Las Vegas Athletics, for them to be our team, our town? I mean, we have our city, our people. I mean, Las Vegas, the city of champions, the Las Vegas Aces and the Vegas Golden Knights. I mean, there's a reason why I call this show from the sports entertainment capital of the world. Well, I feel like I could also call it the sports betting capital of the world, because this is one of the best cities to be at. But when it comes to the Las Vegas A's, from somebody who's kind of an outsider perspective, somebody who's, a Yankees fan, and then now you're going to, be looking at the Las Vegas A's, how exciting is it going to be to have the Las Vegas A's here and to have that proposed ballpark where Tropicana currently is now?
You know what? You want it. I hear people criticizing. Hear them criticizing, but talk about smart business people. They know they're going to bring the A's here, and they know the stadium's going to be filled with half of the visiting team's fans, whether they live in Las Vegas or whether they live in Phoenix or LA or wherever they live, because they can come here. For instance, when we go from here to California, it costs a fortune to go there and watch these teams play. But now you can come to Las Vegas. You can go out a night on the town. You can enjoy the city and you can watch your team. You can live in Las Vegas and you can go watch your team. I promise you, I'm going to be watching the Yankees every time they come here. I've got a lot of Mets fans here. They're going to be watching the Mets every time they come here. So there may be people that criticize the owners of the A's for not having the best team on the field, but you know what? He's a smart businessman, and so is Manfred. They know that people are going to attend those games to see their team. They're relocated here in Las Vegas or close to Las Vegas, or they're going to travel here. Smart business decision.
I really do believe it's going to be a smart financial decision. The Oakland A's, their farm system has been getting built up the last year or two. As a matter of fact, the Las Vegas Stars are going to be here on Sunday. The Las Vegas Aviators are going to have their throwback night where they're going to have their inaugural season jerseys on from 1983. The Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, I will be at that game, by the way. That's going to be an amazing event to be at. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be at the Las Vegas Aviators game when they throw back to the Las Vegas Stars. Amazing uniforms. But I want to ask you, when it comes to, nostalgia, when it comes to these, throwback nights, how important is that for baseball? Like, how important is it, not just from a merchandise perspective, not just from a concessions perspective, but how important is it when these teams, have these nostalgia, these retro nights, and they bring back the old school jerseys, they bring back, the old school, scoreboards, and they have all the aesthetics and everything. I mean, from someone who's watched baseball for a long time, how cool is that for a team to really go back to their first ever season playing baseball?
And saying somebody's been watching for a long time, that's a little pointed there, Mr. Ian Rakelli. But accepting that I am Vegas Mike and I am a seasoned citizen, let's just say, if I could go back and watch Babe Ruth play a game live, I would love it. So nostalgia nights are very important. They're fun. People tend to have a good time because everybody loves to live the past, because we always remember the good and we forget the bad. So even though the Mets are trying really hard, they did win a World Series. They were terrible at one time, even though Houston was absolutely terrible at one time. I remember the Colt 45s. They were absolutely a disaster. People forget that. So people like to remember the good of the past. We all do. So nostalgia nights are a great thing.
Fantastic. And, I'm a big fan of uniforms, by the way. I love looking at uniforms, especially the old school uniforms. And I was talking to a friend of mine a while ago, and I mentioned that back in the 90s and 2000s, there was a trend in baseball that became very alarming. I don't know if you paid attention to it, where everyone had pinstripes on their uniforms, where it felt like everybody was copying or at least imitating your New York Yankees by having pinstripes, by having some version of striped jerseys on. It felt like every team in baseball was doing it in the 2000s or late 90s. So as someone as a Yankees fan, was that a weird time? Because like the Cubs did it, the Reds did it, the Diamondbacks were doing it. Like it felt like every team was doing it. So as you being a Yankees fan, you were the original. You're the pinstripes, right? Like how weird was it seeing pretty much all of baseball, including the Houston Astros, who had striped jerseys as well during that time period? How weird was that?
In the past and keep saying how old I am now. My wife, Vegas Karen, thinks I'm young, so you're going to greatly disillusion her here. So let's go into the football and let's look at the Dallas Cowboys. Everybody loves the Dallas Cowboys and everybody wants to be a Dallas Cowboy, but they're a terrible team now. So I don't know if everybody wanted to be a pinstripe, but everybody wanted to be a Yankee. No, everybody shoot me for that one, wouldn't they? No, I think they're great. And whether you want to be a Yankee or a Cowboy, it doesn't matter. People love the past. They love the good thoughts, the positive thoughts. So I think the past is a good place to reminisce in sometimes. And by the way, I'm not old.
Absolutely not. And before we get to the end of the show, we got about 2 minutes left. Someone said, are the Yankees the MLB version of the Los Angeles Lakers? Where in the NBA, everybody wants to play for the Lakers. Everyone wants to wear the purple and gold. They want to win championships in LA. Do you think that's the same with the New York Yankees? That the New York Yankees are the MLB version of what the Lakers are in the NBA?
Answer it with a question. What's the most valuable MLB team?
Valuable baseball team is the New York Yankees. That is correct.
And it's all about the money. It's always about the money. It's always been about the money. Who do you think one of the most valuable NBA teams are?
Top two in terms of franchise value. The New York Knicks, by the way, are either number one or number two. I always like to point that out. The New York Knicks haven't done much recently, but they're still a team I support. I always like seeing them in the playoffs. Hopefully they can win an NBA Finals one day. But to conclude,
who's one of the most valuable NFL teams?
In the NFL, I'd say the Cowboys. Definitely the Cowboys. They'd be up there.
So it depends on who the value. The money, the people, the fans go to where the money is. So it's about the money. So I would say, yes, Yankees, Lakers, Cowboys, go where the money is.
Montreal Canadiens in the NHL. Now, I will say, Vegas Mike, I appreciate you being on the show. You were a fantastic guest. I always love having you on the show. And this was the Sports Angle on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. And until next time, have a good one. If you're watching sports, go support your local sports and have a great weekend.